My son thought I was asleep. He thought my old eyes missed the thick brown envelope he taped under my dashboard. He didn't know I moved it to his glove box the second he turned his back. 23 minutes later, when the sirens wailed, he realized he wasn't sending me to prison. He was sending himself. If you enjoy stories about karma hitting hard and fast, like and subscribe. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I sat in the cab of my 1978 Ford F-250, my breathing shallow and rhythmic, mimicking the deep sleep of an old man worn out by the afternoon sun. The brim of my hat was pulled low, shading my eyes, but beneath the felt rim, my gaze was fixed on the side view mirror. The angle was perfect. It captured the entire passenger side of my truck and the nervous, twitchy movements of my son Travis. He looked around the empty driveway, his eyes darting toward the front porch of my house, then back to the street. He was sweating. I could see the sheen of perspiration on his forehead, even from here. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick, heavy manila envelope. It was wrapped tightly in electrical tape. He dropped to one knee, pretending to tie his shoe, but I saw his hand shoot up under the chassis of my truck, right beneath the passenger side floorboard. I heard the faint, distinctive sound of duct tape being ripped and smoothed over metal. My heart didn't race, my pulse didn't spike. In my line of work, panic was a luxury you couldn't afford, and old habits die hard. I just felt a cold, heavy stone settle in my stomach. Just 2 hours ago, Travis had sat at my kitchen table eating the roast beef sandwich I made him, asking for $50,000. He called it an investment opportunity. I knew it was for gambling debts. I knew about the nights he spent at the underground casinos in Atlantic City. I knew about the second mortgage on his house. When I told him no, that the well was dry, and I was just a pensioner living on Social Security, his eyes had gone dead. Not angry, just dead. Now I knew why. He wasn't just mad. He was executing a plan. Travis stood up, brushed the dirt off the knees of his designer jeans, and walked briskly toward the front door where his wife Brittany was waiting. I watched them in the reflection. Brittany whispered something to him, her eyes sharp and predatory. Travis nodded, patting his pocket where the envelope used to be, then pointed toward my truck. She smirked. It was a look of pure, unadulterated malice. They went inside to use the restroom, they said. I knew I had less than 3 minutes. I moved with a speed that would have surprised anyone who only knew me as Old Jack the retiree who spent his days fishing and fixing lawnmowers. I slid out of the driver's side, my boots hitting the gravel without a sound. I crouched low, moving around the back of the truck to the passenger side. I reached under the chassis. My fingers grazed the rough adhesive of the duct tape. I ripped it free. The envelope fell into my hand. It was heavier than I expected. Dense, granular. I didn't need to open it to know this wasn't money. This was a felony. This was 10 to 20 years in a federal penitentiary. This was a one-way ticket to a nursing home or a pauper's grave for me and power of attorney for them. I stayed low and moved toward Travis's silver BMW parked just 10 feet away. It was unlocked. Of course it was. Travis was arrogant. He thought he was the smartest man in the room because he wore a suit and I wore flannel. I opened the passenger door. It didn't make a sound. I popped the glove box. It was full of unpaid parking tickets and a stack of napkins. I shoved the heavy taped envelope deep into the back behind the owner's manual and slammed it shut. I wasn't done. I walked to the back of his BMW. I looked at his left taillight. I took the heavy brass keychain from my pocket, the one with the mini flashlight, and struck the red plastic cover. It cracked. A small piece of red plastic fell to the driveway. I kicked it into the grass. Now there was probable cause. I slipped back into the driver's seat of my truck, pulled my hat down, and closed my eyes. 30 seconds later, the front door opened. I heard their voices. Loud. Performative. "Thanks for lunch, Dad." Travis shouted, his voice cracking slightly. "We are heading out." I stirred, pretending to wake up. I waved a hand lazily out the window. "Drive safe," I grunted. Brittany waved. She looked giddy, like she had just won the lottery. In her mind, she probably had. She saw the $15 million plot of land my warehouse sat on, not the rusty truck I drove. She saw the liquidation of my assets. She saw freedom from their debt. They got into the BMW. I watched Travis reverse out of the driveway. I saw the crack in his taillight glint in the sun. I checked my watch. I waited exactly 3 minutes. Enough time for them to get to the main road, but not enough to get on the highway. Then I started my engine. The old diesel roared to life. I put it in gear and followed them. I drove the speed limit. I kept my hands at 10 and 2. I was the picture of a law-abiding citizen. I turned onto County Road 9, the long stretch of asphalt that led out of town. I drove for 2 miles, the silence of the cabin interrupted only by the hum of the tires. Then I saw them. Blue and red lights flashed in my rearview mirror. A sheriff's cruiser was coming up fast behind me. I wasn't surprised. Travis hadn't just planted the drugs. He had made the call. An anonymous tip. A concerned citizen reporting an erratic driver in an old Ford truck possibly transporting narcotics. It was a classic move, sloppy but effective against a civilian. I pulled over to the shoulder, the gravel crunching under my tires. I put the truck in park and rolled down the window. I kept my hands on the steering wheel, visible and steady. Sheriff Reynolds walked up to the window. "I've known Jim Reynolds for 20 years. I helped him get his first mortgage when no bank would touch him. He didn't know that, of course. He just knew I was Jack, the guy who donated anonymously to the police benevolent fund every Christmas." "Afternoon," Jack Reynolds said, tipping his hat. He looked uncomfortable. He looked like a man who had been given a job he didn't want to do. "Afternoon, Jim," I said calmly. "Is there a problem? We got a call, Jack," he said, sighing. "Anonymous tip. Said you were swerving. Said you might be holding something you shouldn't." I raised an eyebrow. "Swerving? I've been doing 45 the whole way." "I know, Jack. I've been behind you for a mile. You drive straighter than a ruler. But once the call comes in, especially with the specifics they gave, I have to check." "Protocol, specifics," I asked. Reynolds shifted his weight. "They said under the dashboard. Passenger side." I looked at him. My face was a mask of confusion. "Under the dashboard, Jim, you know the only thing I keep in this truck is motor oil and fishing tackle. Mind if I take a look just to clear it up?" "Go ahead," I said. I unlocked the passenger door. Reynolds walked around. He opened the door. He knelt down. I watched him in the mirror. He felt under the dashboard. He felt the sticky residue of the fresh duct tape, but his hand came back empty. He frowned. He got down on his back and looked up under the seat. He checked the glove box. He checked behind the seat. Nothing. He stood up, brushing dust off his uniform. He looked angry now. Not at me. At the situation. At the waste of time. "There is nothing here, Jack," he said, walking back to my window. "I told you, Jim." I shook my head, feigning a realization. "You know my son Travis just left the house. He drives a silver BMW. He was acting a little strange. Maybe the caller got the vehicles mixed up. You know how folks get confused." Reynolds paused. He looked down the road. "Silver BMW. Yeah. He left about 3 minutes before me. Headed toward the interstate." Reynolds narrowed his eyes. "I saw a silver BMW a few miles back. Broken taillight. I didn't pull him over because I was looking for you." I stayed silent. I let the information hang in the air. "Broken taillight gives you probable cause, doesn't it?" I asked innocently. "And if the tipster got the truck wrong?" Reynolds tapped the roof of my truck. "You are free to go, Jack. Sorry for the hassle." He walked back to his cruiser. He didn't turn his lights off. He picked up his radio. I watched him peel out, making a U-turn, tires screeching, as he headed toward the highway on-ramp. I put my truck in drive and pulled back onto the road. I didn't drive home. I drove toward the police station. I knew I wouldn't have to wait long. 23 minutes after I moved the envelope, my phone rang. It was Travis. I let it ring 3 times before picking up. "Hello, Dad." "Dad, you have to help me." His voice was high-pitched, bordering on hysterical. I could hear background noise. Voices. The static of a police radio. "Travis, what is going on? I'm arrested, Dad." "They arrested me. They found... Oh God, they found something in the car. It's not mine, I swear it's not mine. Someone planted it. Slow down," I said, my voice steady. "Who arrested you, Reynolds? Sheriff Reynolds. Dad, you know him. You have to come down here. You have to tell them I'm a good guy. They are talking about felonies, Dad." "Federal charges." I pulled into the parking lot of the sheriff's station. I could see Reynolds's cruiser parked near the intake entrance. The silver BM was being towed into the impound lot. "What did they find, Travis?" I asked. He hesitated. The silence was heavy. "Drugs, Dad. And a gun. A ghost gun." I closed my eyes for a second. A ghost gun. No serial number. Untraceable. He wasn't just trying to frame me for possession. He was trying to frame me for distribution and armed trafficking. He wanted me buried under the prison. "And where was this found?" I asked. "In the glove box," he sobbed. "But I didn't put it there. I don't know how it got there." I parked the truck. I looked at the station building. It was red brick, solid, unforgiving. "I am outside, Travis. Thank God." "Come inside. Bring your checkbook. You have to bail me out. You have to hire a lawyer. A good one." I walked into the station lobby. It smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. I saw Travis through the glass of the holding area. He was cuffed to a bench. His tie was undone. He looked small, pathetic. Brittany was in a chair nearby, crying, her mascara running down her face. She was screaming at a deputy about her rights. Reynolds came out to the lobby. He looked grim. "Jack," he said. "It's bad. We found 200 fentanyl pills and a 9mm with the serial number filed off." I looked at Reynolds. Then I looked through the glass at my son. Travis saw me. He jumped up, rattling the cuffs. Dad, tell them. Get me out of here." I turned to Reynolds. "I want to speak to him." Reynolds nodded. He buzzed me through. I walked into the holding area. The air was colder in here. Travis looked at me with desperate hope. Brittany looked at me with something else. Suspicion. She was smarter than him. She was replaying the last hour in her head. "Dad, fix this," Travis pleaded. "Pay the bail. Call the family lawyer." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had sat at my table and eaten my food while planning to destroy me. I looked at the son who valued my money more than my life. "I can't do that, Travis," I said. "What?" His face twisted. "What do you mean you can't?" "You have the money, I know. You have the savings bonds, I do," I said softly. "But those are for my retirement. And this is a criminal matter, son." "Fentanyl, a gun. That's not a mistake. That's a lifestyle choice." "You are abandoning me," he screamed. "I am your son. You are a man who drives around with enough poison to kill half the town," I said, my voice rising just enough to silence the room. "You are a man who tried to play games with the law." Brittany stood up. "You old fool," she shrieked. "You did this. You moved it. I know you moved it." The room went silent. Reynolds looked at Brittany. Travis looked at Brittany. "Moved what, ma'am?" Reynolds asked, stepping forward. She froze. She realized too late that she had just admitted knowledge of the package. She had just placed herself at the scene of the conspiracy. I mean, someone must have moved it, she stammered. I looked at Reynolds. Jim, it sounds like my daughter-in-law knows more about these drugs than she's letting on. I turned back to Travis. I'm not bailing you out, Travis. I'm not hiring a lawyer. You are going to have to face this on your own. Maybe it will teach you the responsibility I failed to teach you for 38 years. Dad, please don't leave me here. I turned my back on him. I walked back into the lobby. I heard him screaming my name. I heard Brittany cursing me. I heard Reynolds reading Brittany her Miranda rights. I walked out into the sunshine. The air tasted sweet. It tasted like justice. But I knew this wasn't over. Travis was desperate and Brittany was vicious. They were cornered animals now, and a cornered animal doesn't just give up. It bites. I got back into my truck and dialed a number I hadn't called in years. Blackwood. A voice answered on the first ring. It was smooth, sharp, and sounded like a shark swimming in deep water. It's Jack O'Connor, I said. Jack Blackwood said, his tone shifting from professional to respectful. It's been a decade. To what do I owe the pleasure? I need you to open a file, I said. My son just got arrested for trafficking. I need to make sure he stays in there long enough for me to secure my assets. And Blackwood. Yes. I want to call in the favor on the land deed. The one we buried in the trust. Consider it done. I hung up. I looked at my hands. They were steady. The first battle was won, but the war had just begun. I started the engine. I had work to do. I had to secure the house. I had to check the safe. Because if I knew Brittany, she wasn't going to sit in a cell and rot. She was going to come for me, and she was going to come hard. I pulled out of the station lot, my eyes checking the mirrors, not for the police this time, but for the other threats I knew were lurking in the shadows of my son's life. The debt collectors, the sharks. They would be looking for their money. And now that Travis was locked up, they would be looking for me. I didn't have to wait long. The sun was just dipping below the tree line, casting long shadows across the porch, when I heard the screech of tires. It wasn't the BMW that was sitting in an impound lot. It was a taxi, and it was moving way too fast for my gravel driveway. Brittany burst out of the back seat before the car had even come to a complete stop. She looked like a hurricane of smeared makeup and fury. She didn't knock. She hammered on my front door with both fists, screaming my name like a curse word. I opened the door slowly. I stood in the threshold, blocking her path. I didn't say a word. I just looked at her. You did this, she shrieked, pushing past me into the living room. Her eyes were wild, darting around my modest home as if looking for a weapon or a witness. You set him up. You planted those pills. You ruined everything. I closed the door calmly and turned to face her. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The silence in the room was heavy enough to crush her. I did nothing, Brittany. I said, my voice low and level. Your husband drove the car. Your husband carried the drugs. Your husband broke the law. If anyone ruined anything, it was the two of you thinking you could play gangster in my town. She laughed, a sharp, hysterical sound that grated on my nerves. Don't give me that innocent old man act. Travis isn't smart enough to hide drugs in his own glove box. He told me the plan. He told me he put it under your dashboard. There it was. The confirmation. She wasn't just a bystander. She was the architect. She knew the plan because she probably wrote it. So you admit it, I said. You admit you conspired to plant felonies on a senior citizen. You admit you wanted to send your father-in-law to prison. She stopped pacing. She looked at me with pure venom. Prison would have been too good for you, Jack. We needed you gone. We needed you out of the way so we could finally liquidate this garbage dump of a life you hold on to so tightly. She swept her arm around the room, gesturing to my worn leather recliner, the photos on the mantel, the life I had built over 40 years. We had a buyer, Jack, she screamed, her voice cracking. We had a buyer lined up for tomorrow morning, a cash offer for the land. And now Travis is in a cell. The assets are going to be frozen, and that useless rotting warehouse out back is going to sit there and gather dust for another decade while you play the martyr. I looked at her, and for a split second I almost felt sorry for her. Not because she was suffering, but because she was so incredibly stupid. She called it a rotting warehouse. She saw a rusted corrugated metal shed sitting on 10 acres of overgrown scrubland. She saw a place where I stored old engine parts and memories she deemed worthless. She saw a few $100,000 maybe enough to pay off Vinny the shark and buy a few more months of her fake lifestyle. She didn't know what I knew. She didn't know that 40 years ago when I bought that land for pennies, I wasn't buying it for the view. I was buying it because it sat directly between the interstate and the rail line. She didn't know that underneath that scrubland lay the main fiber optic trunk line for the entire tri-state area. She didn't know that the trash warehouse was actually the only commercially zoned logistics point within 50 miles capable of supporting a Tier 4 data center. She thought it was worth scrap metal prices. I had an appraisal in my safe from a tech conglomerate in Silicon Valley that valued the land at $15 million. And that was the starting offer. It is just a warehouse, Brittany, I said, keeping the amusement out of my voice. Why would you care so much about a pile of rust? Because it is money, she yelled, stomping her foot like a petulant child. It is the only thing of value you have. We were going to sell it to a developer for a strip mall. Do you know how much debt we are in? Oh. Have any idea what it costs to live the way we do? I looked at her designer handbag, now scuffed from her time at the station. I looked at the diamond on her finger, likely unpaid for. I know exactly what it costs, I said. It costs your soul. And apparently it costs your freedom. She lunged at me. It was a clumsy, desperate move. She grabbed the front of my flannel shirt, her nails digging into my chest. Fix this, she hissed, her face inches from mine. You have money buried somewhere. I know you do. Travis said you keep cash in the walls. Get it. Pay the bail. Pay the lawyers. Or I swear to God, Jack, I will burn this house down with you in it. I didn't flinch. I reached up and took her wrists. My hands were calloused strong from decades of hauling crates and turning wrenches. I removed her hands from my shirt with a force that made her gasp. I didn't hurt her, but I made it very clear that physical intimidation was not a game she could win. I held her wrists for a second longer than necessary, staring into her eyes until I saw the fear creep back in. You are threatening the wrong man. Brittany, I said, my voice dropping an octave. You are standing in my house. You are speaking to the man who holds the deed to the roof over your head. And you are confessing to crimes that could put you away for a very long time. I released her. She stumbled back, rubbing her wrists. Get out, I said. She stared at me, her chest heaving. You can't kick me out. I am family. You stopped being family the moment you helped my son tape a bag of poison to my truck, I said. Get out of my house. Get off my property. If I see you here again, if I see your car in the driveway, if I even smell your perfume on the wind, I will call Sheriff Reynolds and I will hand him the security footage from inside my home office. Her face went pale. She didn't know about the cameras. She looked toward the hallway toward the office where she and Travis had rummaged through my files just a week ago. You watched us, she whispered. I watch everything I said. Now. Run. She didn't argue. She didn't scream. The reality of her position finally crashed down on her. She turned and ran out the door, nearly tripping over her own heels. I watched her scramble into the waiting taxi. I watched the taillights fade into the darkness. I locked the door. I threw the deadbolt. I turned to the window and looked out at the dark outline of the warehouse against the night sky. A strip mall. She wanted to sell a gold mine for a strip mall. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. My hand was steady, but my mind was racing. They were desperate. They were sloppy. And now they were terrified. But Brittany was right about one thing. The debt. They owed money to people who didn't care about fiber optic lines or real estate zoning. They owed money to people who broke legs for interest payments. I needed to secure the perimeter. I needed to open the safe. Because if Brittany was willing to threaten arson to my face, she was capable of much worse when her back was truly against the wall. I put the glass down on the counter. The silence of the house felt different now. It wasn't peaceful. It was the deep breath before the plunge. I walked to the rug in the center of my study and pulled it back. The floor safe was there, hidden beneath a loose floorboard. I spun the dial. Left, right, left. The tumblers clicked. It was a sound I loved. The sound of secrets being kept. I lifted the heavy steel lid. Inside lay the deeds, the trust documents, and the digital hard drives containing the footage of their betrayal. But I wasn't looking for papers tonight. I reached deeper and pulled out the file marked Financials, Travis. I opened it. The numbers were in red. Deep red. $2 million. That was the number Blackwood had given me. That was the debt Travis owed to Vinny the Shark. I closed the file. I knew what I had to do. I couldn't just let the sharks eat my son, not because I wanted to save him, but because if they killed him, they would come for the estate next. And I wasn't about to let a 2-bit loan shark take what I had spent a lifetime building. I had to become the shark. I took out my phone and dialed Blackwood again. "It's Jack," I said when he answered. "Go ahead, Jack." "I want to buy the debt," I said. The line was silent for a moment. "All of it?" Blackwood asked. "Every cent. I want Vinny out of the picture. I want to be the one holding the leash. It will cost you a premium, Jack. Vinny doesn't sell cheap. Use the rainy day fund," I said. "And Blackwood. Yes, don't tell Travis. I want him to think the wolves are still at the door. I want him to think I am the only thing standing between him and the abyss." "Understood. I'll draw up the paperwork tonight." I hung up. I looked at the empty room. Brittany thought she was fighting a lonely old man. She didn't know she was fighting the bank. And the bank always wins. The house was quiet again, but the silence felt heavy like the air before a tornado touches down. I sat in my leather chair, the phone still warm in my hand from the call with Blackwood. I had set the financial trap, but money was just numbers on a page. I needed to see the heart of the betrayal. I needed to see exactly what kind of animals I was dealing with. I swiveled the chair around and looked at the safe I had left open. The financial file was on the desk, but the safe wasn't empty. Nestled in the back behind the stacks of bonds and the Glock 19 I hoped I would never have to use was a small black hard drive. It was connected to a closed-circuit system I had installed 6 months ago. I didn't install it because I was paranoid. I installed it because I had noticed things moving. A file folder shifted 2 inches to the left. A drawer slightly ajar. Subtle things. The kind of things only a man who spent 40 years managing logistics would notice. I pulled the hard drive out and plugged it into my laptop. The screen flickered to life. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach, a physical ache that had nothing to do with age. I didn't want to watch this. No father wants to watch the evidence of his own failure. But I had to know. I scrolled through the timeline. I stopped at last Thursday. Thursday was my poker night with the guys from the union. I was gone for 4 hours. I clicked play. The timestamp read 7:14 p.m. The door to my office opened. It wasn't forced. They used a key. I watched my son Travis walk in. He wasn't wearing the suit he usually paraded around in. He was in dark clothes, moving quickly, nervously. Brittany followed him. She didn't look nervous. She looked efficient. She put on latex gloves. They didn't just look around. They tore the room apart. I watched them pull books off the shelves, shaking them by the spine to see if papers fell out. I watched Travis open my filing cabinet, his fingers flying through the folders I had meticulously organized. He wasn't looking for cash. Cash was easy. He was looking for power. "Where is it?" I heard Travis's voice through the speakers. It was tinny, but clear. He said it was in the blue folder. He lied, Brittany hissed. She was ripping through my desk drawers, dumping pens and staples onto the floor. He probably moved the will to a safety deposit box. Old bastard is smarter than he looks. I watched my son stop. He looked at the mess they had made. For a second, I thought I saw hesitation. I thought I saw a glimmer of guilt. But then he spoke and that hope died. "If we can't find the original will, the trust fund stands," Travis said. "The clause about the gambling debt. It locks me out, Brittany. If he dies and that trust is active, I get nothing. The VFW gets it all. Then we make sure he doesn't die while he's lucid," Brittany said. She stopped rummaging and leaned against my desk, crossing her arms. "We need him incompetent, Travis. We need a medical power of attorney before we need a death certificate." I leaned closer to the screen, my breath catching in my throat. This wasn't just greed. This was predation, how Travis asked. The doctor gave him a clean bill of health last month. "His heart is strong." "His heart is fine, but his mind is old," Brittany said. Her voice was cold, detached, like she was discussing how to exterminate termites. "I know a guy in the city. He sells compounds. Scopolamine. Or we just double his beta blockers. Make him dizzy. Make him fall. One bad fall, a little brain bleed, and he is unfit to manage his affairs. You step in as guardian. We liquidate the assets to pay for his care." I watched Travis. I waited for him to shout at her. I waited for him to say, "That is my father you are talking about." I waited for him to throw her out of the room. Instead, he nodded. "How long would it take?" he asked. "A week," Brittany said. "Maybe 2. We start small. Put it in his coffee. He gets confused. He forgets things. We call the doctor, tell him Jack is losing it. We build a paper trail. By the time the lawyers get involved, he won't even know his own name." I paused the video. I stared at the frozen image of my son. He was looking at Brittany with admiration. He wasn't horrified by the idea of poisoning his father. He was relieved that there was a solution to his problem. I sat back in my chair, the silence of the room deafening. I felt a coldness spread through my chest, freezing the last bit of warmth I held for the boy I taught to ride a bike. The boy I held when he scraped his knee. That boy was dead. He had been replaced by this stranger on the screen, this man who was willing to erase my mind, to fill his wallet. They weren't just going to sell my land. They were going to steal my dignity. They were going to trap me in a fog of confusion and drugs, leaving me to rot while they picked the meat off my bones. I closed the laptop. I didn't need to see any more. The sadness was gone. The shock was gone. What was left was a clarity as sharp as a razor blade. They wanted to play God with my life. They wanted to control my reality. Fine. I stood up and walked over to the window. I looked out at the dark property line. They wanted a confused old man. I would give them one. But I wouldn't be the victim in their play. I would be the director. I went back to the safe. I took the hard drive and put it in a fireproof envelope. This was my insurance. This was the nail in their coffin. But I wasn't going to turn it over to the police just yet. Attempted poisoning was hard to prove with just a conversation. I needed them to make a move. I needed them to commit. I put the envelope back in the safe and spun the dial. I picked up my phone. I had one more call to make before the sun came up. I dialed a number that belonged to a private forensic team I used back when I ran the logistics company. They specialized in documenting industrial accidents, but for the right price they did house calls. "It's Jack," I said when the line connected. "I have a job. I need a gas line rigged to look like a sabotage, and I need it documented before the cops get here." "Tonight?" the voice asked. "Tonight," I said. "My son is out on bail. He's desperate. And a desperate man always goes back to the scene of the crime." I hung up. I walked to the kitchen. I looked at the coffee maker on the counter, the one Brittany had suggested she start using to make me fresh brew in the mornings. I unplugged it and threw it in the trash. The game had changed. They wanted to take my mind. I was going to take their freedom. And I was going to do it while they thought they were winning. The elevator ride to the 54th floor of the Liberty Tower was silent, smooth, and fast. I wasn't going to a back alley to meet a fixer. I was going to the corner office of Marcus Blackwood, the most ruthless corporate attorney in the state. Blackwood wasn't the kind of lawyer you called when you wanted to draft a will. He was the man you called when you wanted to bury a company or destroy a bloodline legally. He was waiting for me. The office was dim, lit only by the city lights sprawling below through floor-to-ceiling windows. He didn't offer a drink. He didn't offer a hand. He pointed to the leather chair opposite his mahogany desk. I sat. Blackwood slid a thick black dossier across the polished wood. It stopped exactly at the edge right in front of me. "This is the autopsy of your son's financial life," Jack Blackwood said. His voice dry and devoid of emotion. "It is worse than we thought. It is terminal." I opened the file. I expected to see credit card debt. I expected to see car loans. I expected stupidity. I didn't expect to see a death warrant. The summary page was a sea of red ink. $2.4 million in total liabilities. But it was the line item highlighted in yellow that made my blood run cold. $1.8 million owed to Venture Capital LLC. I looked up at Blackwood. Venture Capital. "It's a shell," Blackwood said. "The principal is Vincent Moretti, Vinny the Shark." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the office air conditioning. In the logistics business, you knew the name. Moretti didn't run a bank. He ran a meat grinder. He was old-school mafia, the kind who didn't bother with credit scores because he dealt in broken kneecaps. "Travis borrowed nearly $2 million from a loan shark," I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "How he doesn't have collateral for that kind of cash. He doesn't own anything but a leased car and a wardrobe of cheap suits." Blackwood sighed. He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was heavy legal bond. He placed it on top of the file. "He used this," Blackwood said softly. I looked down. It was a property deed transfer. A mortgage lien against a specific parcel of land. My land. My warehouse, my home. And at the bottom in blue ink was a signature. Jackson O'Connor. It was a good forgery. He had practiced. The loop on the J was almost perfect. The slant was right. But it lacked the tremor in the N that I had developed over the last few years. It was the signature of a younger man trying to be an older one. "He forged my name," I said the words, tasting like ash in my mouth. "He mortgaged my house to the mob." "Yes," Blackwood confirmed, "and Moretti accepted it. He knows the land is worth 10 times the loan. He isn't betting on Travis paying him back Jack. He is betting on Travis defaulting. He wants the land. He wants to foreclose. The moment Travis misses a payment, Moretti comes for the deed. He comes for you." I stared at the paper. This was why. This was why they needed me gone. It wasn't just greed. It was survival. Travis had sold something he didn't own to a man who would kill him if he didn't deliver. If I was alive and fighting, the forgery would be exposed, and Moretti would realize he had been duped. He would skin Travis alive. But if I was incompetent or dead or in prison, Travis could use power of attorney to ratify the loan. He could make the forgery legal retroactively. They weren't just thieves. They were cornered rats trying to chew through the wall, and I was the wall. So Blackwood said, leaning back, "What is the play? We can go to the district attorney. We prove the forgery. The lien is void. Moretti loses his claim." I shook my head. "No police. Not for this. If we involve the law, the land gets tied up in evidence for years. The data center deal in Silicon Valley falls through. And Moretti, if he loses his money because of a police report, he won't sue. He will send a hit squad. He will kill Travis, and then he will come for me." "Then you want to pay it off?" Blackwood asked, reaching for his pen. "I can draft a settlement. We pay the principal. We get the deed back." Travis walks away clean. I looked at Blackwood. He thought I was a father trying to save his son. He didn't understand. That father died in the police station parking lot. "No," I said. "I don't want to pay it off." Blackwood frowned. "Then what do you want?" I leaned forward, my eyes locking onto his. "I want to buy the note." Blackwood froze. "You want to buy the debt. I want to be the holder of the note," I clarified. "I want you to set up a shell company. Call it Nemesis Holdings. You approach Moretti tonight. You tell him you represent an investor who buys distressed high-risk debt. You offer him full value for the loan cash immediately. Moretti is a businessman. He knows Travis is in jail. He knows his investment is shaky. He would rather have cash in hand than a complicated foreclosure battle. He will sell." And then Blackwood asked slowly, seeing the shape of the blade I was sharpening. And then I said, a cold smile touching my lips, "Nemesis Holdings owns the debt. Nemesis Holdings holds the lien. And Nemesis Holdings calls the loan due." Blackwood stared at me for a long moment. He set his pen down. "Jack," he said quietly, "if you do this, you become the creditor. You hold the power of foreclosure over your own son. You aren't saving him. You are putting your boot on his neck." "He tried to erase me, Marcus," I said. "He tried to poison my mind. He tried to steal my freedom. He treated me like an asset to be liquidated. I am just teaching him how the market works." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city that didn't care about fathers or sons. "Do it," I said. "Buy the debt. Transfer the lien to me. And don't tell Travis. I want him to think Moretti is still coming for him. I want him to sweat. I want him to feel the pressure building until he cracks wide open." Blackwood nodded. He opened his laptop. "I will have the papers drawn up within the hour. Moretti will have his money by dawn. You will own your son's life by breakfast." I looked at my reflection in the glass. I looked old, tired, but my eyes were hard as flint. "Good," I said. I turned and walked out of the office. I left the forged deed on the desk. It was just a piece of paper now, a receipt for a soul that had been sold cheap. I had work to do. My son was in jail, my daughter-in-law was on the run, and I had just bought a $2 million headache. But as I rode the elevator down, I didn't feel fear. I felt clarity. Travis thought he was playing a game of chess. He didn't realize I had just bought the board. It took 48 hours for Brittany to liquidate their life. She didn't do it out of loyalty. She did it out of terror. She knew that with Travis inside, she was vulnerable to the sharks circling their debt. She sold the leased BMW to a shady dealership that didn't ask questions about the impound status. She pawned the jewelry I had given her mother for Christmas years ago. She emptied their joint savings, which wasn't much, and she scraped together the 10% required by the bondsman. Travis walked out of the county jail at dusk on a Tuesday. He didn't look humbled. He didn't look like a man who had just spent 2 nights sleeping on concrete next to meth addicts and brawlers. He looked like a man who had been wronged. He looked volatile. I watched him from the shadows of the diner across the street from the jail. I wasn't eating. I was just observing. He got into the taxi Brittany had waiting. He didn't hug her. He screamed at her. I saw his hands flying, his face contorted in rage. He blamed her. He blamed me. He blamed everyone but the man in the mirror. They didn't go back to their condo. They couldn't. The landlord, having received the notice from Blackwood that my guarantee was pulled, had likely changed the locks within the hour. They were homeless, penniless, and carrying a criminal charge that would stick to them like tar. A desperate man is dangerous, but a desperate man with nothing left to lose is a catastrophe waiting to happen. I drove home, taking the long way, checking my rearview mirror every 30 seconds. The house was dark when I arrived. It stood silent against the night, a wooden box holding a lifetime of memories. I parked the truck in the barn, not the driveway. I wanted them to think I was asleep or maybe not home at all. I went inside and didn't turn on a single light. I navigated by memory, the floorboards creaking familiarly under my boots. I went straight to the basement and located the main breaker panel. I flipped the master switch. The hum of the refrigerator died. The standby lights on the television faded. The house went dead. Then I sat in the kitchen in the dark with a thermal monocular I had pulled from my hunting gear. And I waited. It happened at 3:14 a.m. It started with a sound, not a sight. The crunch of dry leaves near the foundation. It was tentative, clumsy. A professional would have been silent. Travis was stumbling. I lifted the thermal scope to the window. The heat signature was clear. A figure hunched over, moving along the side of the house where the gas meter and the main intake pipe were located. He wasn't trying to break in. He didn't want to confront me. He wanted to erase me. I watched him kneel. He fumbled with something in his pocket. A wrench. Then I saw the heat flare of effort as he cranked on the valve. He wasn't shutting it off. He was bypassing the regulator. Then I saw the flash of metal cutters. He was severing the pilot line that fed into the crawl space. He was flooding the foundation with natural gas. The smell hit me a minute later. Mercaptan. Rotten eggs. It seeped up through the floorboards, thick and cloying. It was the smell of death. Travis wasn't planning a robbery. He was planning an accident. An old house, an old man, a gas leak, a spark. It was a classic narrative. It would blow the house off its foundation and leave nothing but splinters and a grieving son ready to claim the insurance check and the land deed. I didn't call 911. Not yet. If the police arrived now, Travis would run. He would toss the tools. He would claim he was coming to check on me because he smelled gas. He would spin it. I needed something harder than a story. I needed science. I pressed the speed dial on my burner phone. The screen was the only light in the kitchen. "Go," I whispered. 200 yards away, in the dense tree line bordering my property, a black van slid its side door open. I had hired the forensic team 6 hours ago. They were former arson investigators, guys who knew how to document a crime scene before the crime was even finished. I watched on my thermal scope as two figures in dark tactical gear moved silently toward the house. They didn't engage Travis. They flanked him. They set up high-resolution infrared cameras on tripods hidden in the bushes. They aimed parabolic microphones at him. They recorded the sound of the pipe snapping. They recorded his heavy breathing. They recorded him muttering to himself a litany of curses and justifications. "Just die, old man. Just die and fix this." The gas was getting stronger in the kitchen. My throat began to tickle. I put on the respirator mask I had prepared on the counter. Travis stood up. He wiped his hands on his pants. He looked at the dark house one last time. He didn't check if I was inside. He didn't care. He turned and ran toward the road where Brittany was likely waiting in a getaway car with the engine running. I waited until he was gone. Then the forensic team moved in. They didn't stop the leak immediately. They pulled out air quality meters. They documented the parts per million of explosive gas in the crawl space in the kitchen in my bedroom. They took macro photos of the cut pipe showing the tool marks. They dusted the valve for fingerprints, immediately preserving the oils before the morning dew could degrade them. Only when the evidence was secure, locked in digital files and physical sample bags, did they shut off the main valve at the street. I walked out the back door, the respirator still on my face. The lead investigator, a man named Miller, who had seen more fires than he cared to count, met me by the barn. "We have it all," Jack Miller said, his voice muffled by his own mask. The cut, the gas levels, the intent. The concentration was already at explosive limits. If you had flipped a light switch, this whole side of the county would have felt it. "Good," I said, pulling the mask off and taking a gulp of the cool night air. "Send the package to Blackwood." And Miller. "Yeah, don't release it to the police yet." Miller looked at me confused. "Jack, this is attempted capital murder. You have a gas cloud under your floorboards." "I know," I said. "But if we arrest him tonight, he goes back to a cell and claims insanity or desperation. He gets a lawyer. It drags on. I need him to think he succeeded. I need him to think I am out of the game. So what's the play?" I looked at my house, dark and filled with poison. "I'm going to the hospital," I said. "I'm going to check myself in for acute gas poisoning. I'm going to be unconscious, incapacitated." Miller nodded slowly, understanding the game. "You want to give him a window?" "I want to give him a rope," I corrected. "He thinks I'm the only obstacle between him and the money. If he thinks I'm dying in a hospital bed, he won't run. He will come to the house. He will try to sell the land before the body is even cold. He's that greedy." I climbed into the back of Miller's van. We drove to the county hospital. I walked into the ER, complained of dizziness, nausea, and the smell of gas. And then I let myself collapse into a wheelchair. It wasn't hard to fake. The stress and the fumes had left me genuinely weak. By sunrise, the rumor was spreading through town. Old Jack O'Connor had a gas leak. He was in the ICU. It didn't look good. I lay in the hospital bed, listening to the beep of the heart monitor, waiting. I knew Travis would hear the news. I knew Brittany would check the obituaries. They wouldn't flee. They would celebrate. They would think their luck had finally turned. They would come to the house to stake their claim. And when they did, I would be waiting. Not as a father, but as the ghost they failed to kill. The trap was set. The bait was taken. Now all I had to do was wait for the rats to gather for the feast. The beep of the cardiac monitor was steady, a rhythmic artificial pulse that filled the sterile hospital room. I lay still, my eyes closed, a nasal cannula taping my face, my chest rising and falling in a shallow, practiced cadence. I had played dead in the gorge, and now I was playing dying in the ICU. It was a role I was becoming dangerously good at. I heard the heavy door swoosh open. The smell of cheap cologne and stale fear drifted in. It was Travis. He didn't come alone. The click of high heels on the linoleum told me Brittany was right beside him. They didn't approach the bed with reverence. They didn't whisper words of comfort. They stood at the foot of the bed like vultures waiting for the last breath of a dying animal. "He looks bad," Travis said. His voice wasn't sad. It was relieved. "He looks like a vegetable." Brittany corrected her tone, sharp and impatient. "Did the doctor say when he wakes up?" he said. "If he wakes up," Travis replied. "Oxygen deprivation. The gas levels were lethal. Even if he opens his eyes, his brain is mush. He won't know his name, let alone the account numbers." "Good," Brittany said. "That makes the power of attorney airtight. If he is incapacitated, you are the legal guardian. We don't even need him to die, Travis. We just need him to stay like this long enough for the ink to dry." I felt a hand on my leg. It gave a squeeze, but not of affection. It was a test, a pinch, hard. I didn't flinch. I kept my breathing even. I let the heart monitor do the talking for me. "Let's go," Travis said. "The investors are meeting us at the house in an hour. We need to set the stage. We need to turn that dump into a gold mine before the old man kicks the bucket and probate ties us up for months." They left. The door closed. The room fell silent again. I opened my eyes. I sat up and ripped the tape off my face. I pulled the IV sensor off my finger. The monitor flatlined with a high-pitched whine until I hit the silence button. I wasn't dying. I was hunting. I walked to the closet where Miller, my private investigator, had stashed my clothes. I dressed quickly. Flannel shirt, work boots, a baseball cap pulled low. I didn't leave through the front door. Miller was waiting at the service entrance with his black van. We drove back to the property, parking half a mile down the road in a dense patch of woods that bordered my land. We didn't need to be inside the house to see what was happening. We had eyes everywhere. Miller handed me a tablet. The screen was split into 4 views: the kitchen, the living room, the study, and the front porch. The audio was crystal clear. I watched as 3 black SUVs pulled into my driveway. It looked like a funeral procession, but the men stepping out weren't mourners. They were sharks, real estate developers from the city, the kind who bought distressed properties for pennies on the dollar and turned them into strip malls or parking lots. They wore suits that cost more than my truck, but their eyes had the hungry look of scavengers. Travis and Brittany were waiting for them on the porch. Brittany had found a bottle of my reserve bourbon, a bottle I had been saving for my 70th birthday. She was pouring drinks into red plastic cups. The disrespect was so casual, so absolute, it almost made me laugh. "Welcome, gentlemen," Travis said, extending a hand to the lead developer, a heavy-set man named Sterling. "I appreciate you coming out on such short notice. We hear you have a motivated seller situation," Sterling said, ignoring the plastic cup Brittany offered. "We hear the owner is indisposed." "My father is in a coma," Travis said, his face twisting into a mask of fake sorrow. "It was a tragic accident, a gas leak. He's not expected to recover. As his power of attorney, I have to make the hard decisions. The medical bills are going to be astronomical. We need to liquidate the estate to ensure he gets the best care." I watched Sterling look around the property. He sneered at the peeling paint on the barn. He kicked a loose stone on the walkway. "It's a lot of cleanup," Sterling said. "The warehouse is a teardown. The land needs grading. It's a mess, Mr. O'Connor." "It's 10 acres of prime access to the interstate," Travis countered, trying to sound like a businessman. "It's 10 acres of dirt," Sterling corrected. "But we are willing to take it off your hands. Cash. Today. No inspections. No contingencies." "How much?" Brittany asked. She stepped forward, her greed cutting through the pretense. Sterling smiled. It was a shark's smile. 700,000. For the house, the land, and the warehouse. Travis hesitated. 700,000 wouldn't cover the debt to Vinny the shark. It wouldn't even cover half. But he was desperate. He was terrified. He needed money now before the sun went down. 1 million, Travis said. A nice round number. 850, Sterling countered. And that is charity. Done, Travis said too quickly. They moved into the living room. My living room. They sat at the table my wife had picked out 30 years ago. Travis pulled a document from a folder. It was the power of attorney. It was a forgery, and a bad one, likely rushed while I was supposedly gasping for air on the floor. Sterling pulled out a checkbook. He began to write. I watched on the screen. The pen moved across the paper. This was it. The moment of the crime. Conspiracy was one thing. Attempted murder was another. But this was fraud on a massive scale. This was selling a man's life out from under him while drinking his liquor. Wait, Miller whispered next to me in the van. Let him sign the deed transfer. I watched Travis pick up the pen. His hand was shaking. Not from guilt, but from adrenaline. He signed his name. He signed as my agent. He pushed the paper towards Sterling. Sterling pushed the check toward Travis. Brittany snatched the check. She stared at it, her eyes wide. She looked like she wanted to eat it. "We did it," she whispered. "We are free." They clinked their plastic cups. They laughed. It was a sound of pure triumph. "I have seen enough," I said to Miller. I opened the van door. The air outside was cool and crisp. I adjusted my hat. I checked my pocket to make sure my phone was recording. "It's showtime," I said. I didn't walk to the house alone. From the shadows of the tree line, another vehicle emerged. It was Sheriff Reynolds's cruiser lights off, rolling silently over the grass. Behind him was Blackwood's sleek sedan. We walked up the driveway together. The gravel crunched under our boots, but inside they were too busy celebrating to hear the sound of judgment approaching. I walked up the steps to the porch. I didn't knock. I didn't hesitate. I kicked the front door open. It slammed against the wall with a crack like a gunshot. The laughter inside died instantly. Travis dropped his cup. Bourbon splashed onto the hardwood floor. Brittany screamed, clutching the check to her chest. Sterling and his associates jumped up, reaching for briefcases, looking for an exit. Travis stared at me. His face went white. He looked like he was seeing a ghost. "Dad," he whispered, You're in a coma." I stepped into the room. I looked at the mess on the table. The forged papers, the check, the half-empty bottle of bourbon. I said, my voice filling the room deep and resonant. But I woke up. It seems I have a tolerance for poison gas, just like I have a tolerance for rats. Travis stumbled back, knocking over a chair. "This isn't real. This can't be real." "Oh, it's real, Travis," I said. "As real as that check your wife is holding. As real as the prison cell you just earned yourself." I stepped aside. Sheriff Reynolds walked in, his hand resting on his holster. Behind him, Blackwood entered carrying a briefcase that looked like a weapon. "Mr. Sterling Blackwood," said, his voice smooth as silk, "I believe you are holding a fraudulent deed. I suggest you step away from the table before you become an accessory to a felony." Sterling looked at me. He looked at the sheriff. He looked at the check in Brittany's hand. He realized instantly that the deal was dead. He grabbed his papers. "We didn't know," Sterling stammered. "We acted in good faith." "Get out," I said. The developers ran. They didn't walk. They scrambled out the door, leaving their dignity behind. Now it was just us. Me, the sheriff, the lawyer, and the two people who had tried to kill me for a payout. Travis looked at the sheriff. "Jim, please." He's confused. The gas, it messed with his head. "I have the power of attorney. It's legal." Reynolds shook his head. He looked sad. He looked disappointed. Travis Son Reynolds said, "We have the video." "What video?" Brittany snapped. "The video of you cutting the gas line," I said. "The video of you searching my office. The video of you signing that deed 5 minutes ago." I pointed to the corner of the room, to the tiny black lens hidden in the smoke detector. Travis followed my finger. He saw the light. And in that moment, he broke. He didn't fight. He didn't run. He collapsed. He fell to his knees, burying his face in his hands, and he began to sob. Not a cry of remorse, a cry of defeat. But Brittany didn't break. She snarled. She looked at the check in her hand. $850,000. It was her lifeline. It was her escape. She looked at the back door. She looked at me. And she made a choice. She ran. I watched the back door swing shut, the wood vibrating from the force of Brittany's exit. She ran like a rat, abandoning a sinking ship, clutching that worthless check to her chest as if it were a life raft. She didn't look back at her husband. She didn't hesitate. She just ran into the darkness, leaving Travis kneeling in a puddle of spilled bourbon and shattered glass. Sheriff Reynolds didn't chase her. He calmly unclipped the radio from his shoulder. "Dispatch. We have a female suspect fleeing the residence on foot, headed south toward the county road. Pick her up." He looked at me and nodded. She wouldn't get far. The woods around my property were dense, and in those heels she wouldn't make it a mile before a patrol car spotted her. I turned my attention back to the man on the floor. Travis was still on his knees, his hands covering his face, his shoulders shaking. It wasn't the weeping of a child who scraped his knee. It was the guttural, terrified sobbing of a man who had just watched his entire future evaporate. "Get up," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through his sobbing like a knife. He flinched. He slowly lowered his hands and looked up at me. His eyes were red-rimmed with panic and confusion. He looked at the empty table where the developers had been sitting just moments ago. He looked at the forged documents scattered on the floor. "Dad," he stammered, his voice thick with mucus and tears. I didn't mean for it to go this far. The debt. Vinny. They were going to kill me. So you decided to kill me instead." I finished for him. He shook his head violently. No, the gas. It was just supposed to scare you. It was just supposed to force you out of the house." I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I simply walked over to the large flat-screen television mounted above the fireplace. It was the one luxury I had allowed myself in this house, mostly for watching football on Sundays. I picked up the remote and pointed it at the screen. "I want you to watch something, Travis," I said. I pressed a button. The screen flickered to life. The image was crisp, high definition, black and white. It was the thermal feed from the night before. Travis froze. He stared at the screen. He saw the glowing white silhouette of a man creeping along the foundation of the house. He saw the figure kneel. He saw the distinct, undeniable motion of a wrench turning a valve. He saw the bolt cutters snap the line. The audio played through the surround sound speakers. It was crystal clear. "Just die, old man. Just die and fix this." The voice filled the room. It bounced off the walls. It was the voice of my son wishing for my death. Travis went pale. He looked like he was going to be sick. He scrambled backward, crabbing away from the television as if the image could burn him. "That is not just a scare tactic, son," Sheriff Reynolds said, his voice heavy with disgust. "That is attempted capital murder. That is arson. That is premeditated." Travis looked from the screen to me. His face was a mask of horror. You knew the whole time I knew. Before you even cut the pipe," I said. "I watched you do it. I recorded you doing it. And then I went to the hospital and waited for you to hang yourself with your own greed." Travis slumped against the wall. He looked defeated. He looked broken. But then a flicker of something else crossed his face. Desperation. The kind of desperation that makes a man grasp at straws. "It doesn't matter," he whispered. "It doesn't matter if I go to jail. The house, the land, it is still mine. I am the only heir. Even if I am in prison, I inherit it when you die. I can sell it from my cell. I can pay Vinny." I looked at Blackwood. The lawyer had been standing silently by the door, observing the scene with the detached interest of an executioner. He stepped forward now, his leather briefcase clicking open. He pulled out a single document. It wasn't thick. It was a single page of heavy cream-colored paper. "Mr. O'Connor," Blackwood said, his voice smooth and cold. "You seem to be laboring under a significant misunderstanding regarding the ownership of this estate." Travis looked up, wiping his nose with the back of his hand. "What are you talking about?" "I am the only son. It goes to me." Blackwood adjusted his glasses. "Actually, Jack does not own this property. Not legally. Travis frowned. What? 10 years ago, shortly after your mother passed away, your father placed all of his assets, including this land, the warehouse, and his liquid savings into an irrevocable trust, Blackwood explained. He did this to protect the estate from tax liabilities, but also to protect it from other liabilities. Travis looked at me. You put it in a trust, I did, I said. I knew you had a gambling problem even back then, Travis. I knew you were weak. I wanted to make sure that if anything happened to me, the land would be safe. But I am the beneficiary, Travis yelled, trying to find footing. I am the beneficiary of the trust. You were, Blackwood corrected. He held up the paper. Until 48 hours ago. Travis went still. The trust has a morality clause, Blackwood continued. It is a standard provision in high-value estates. It states that if the primary beneficiary is charged with a felony involving narcotics or violent crime, their status as beneficiary is automatically and immediately revoked. Travis stared at the lawyer. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. When you were arrested 2 days ago for possession of fentanyl and an illegal firearm, Blackwood said, tapping the paper, you triggered the clause. The moment the handcuffs went on, you were removed from the trust. You didn't just lose your freedom in that parking lot, Travis. You lost your inheritance. Travis looked at me. His eyes were wide, pleading. Dad, you can't. You can fix this. You can change it back. I can. I admitted. I am the grantor. I have the power to reinstate you. Travis scrambled to his knees. He crawled toward me. Dad, please. Please. Vinny. He will kill me. If I don't have the land, if I don't have the money, he will kill me in prison. You have to put me back on. Just sign a paper. That is all it takes. Just sign a paper and save my life. I looked down at him. I looked at the son who had cut my gas line. I looked at the son who had called me a useless old man. I looked at the son who had tried to erase 40 years of my life for a payout. I thought about the man in the video. I thought about the hate in his voice. I leaned down so my face was level with his. I tried to save you, Travis, I said softly. I tried to teach you to work. I tried to teach you to be honest. I tried to bail you out of debt a dozen times before this. But you didn't want to be saved. You wanted to be rich. Dad, please, he sobbed, reaching for my pant leg. I stepped back out of his reach. The beneficiary has already been updated, I said. The trust now designates the entirety of the estate to the Wounded Warrior Project and the local police benevolent fund. Travis screamed. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated loss. He realized finally that there was no safety net. There was no backup plan. He was going to prison, and he was going as a pauper. The developers were gone. The check Brittany held was bouncing as we spoke, because the deal was void the moment Blackwood showed up. The land wasn't his to sell. He had committed fraud on top of attempted murder. Sheriff Reynolds stepped forward. He pulled a pair of handcuffs from his belt. Travis O'Connor, stand up, Reynolds said. Travis didn't stand. He couldn't. His legs had given out. Reynolds had to haul him up by his armpits. He dragged him toward the door. Travis was limp, his eyes staring at nothing, muttering about the money, about the debt, about the sharks. I watched them drag him out to the cruiser. I watched the flashing lights paint the walls of my living room in blue and red. Blackwood closed his briefcase. It is done, Jack, he said. The trust is sealed. The deed is safe. I nodded. I felt old. I felt tired. But I felt clean. The cancer was cut out. The wound would leave a scar, but it wouldn't kill me. Is Vinny still a problem? Blackwood asked quietly. I looked at the empty doorway where my son had just been dragged out. Vinny is a businessman, I said. He will come for his money. And when he does, I will be ready. I walked to the window and watched the sheriff's car pull away carrying the last remnant of my family down the long, dark driveway. The house was empty now, truly empty. But as I looked around at the silent room, I realized something. It wasn't lonely. It was peaceful. But the night wasn't over. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from the private investigator watching Brittany. "She didn't go to the highway," the text read. "She circled back. She's at the storage unit." I smiled. Of course she was. She wasn't running away. She was running to the stash. She thought she could grab the rest of the pills and disappear. She didn't know I had the key, and she didn't know that Vinny wasn't just looking for money anymore. He was looking for a scapegoat. I turned to Blackwood. "You might want to call the DA," I said. "Tell him we have one more rat to catch, and this one is going to sing." I didn't go home after the police cruisers faded into the distance. Sleep was a luxury for the innocent, and I had just orchestrated the destruction of my own family. There was no rest in that. Instead, I drove to the county jail. I sat in the parking lot for 3 hours, watching the sun bleed into the horizon, turning the sky a bruised purple. I drank cold coffee from a thermos and waited for the system to process my son. I knew exactly what was happening inside those brick walls. I knew the intake procedure, the strip search, the cold water, the orange jumpsuit that smelled of bleach and other men's sweat. I knew Travis was sitting in a holding cell surrounded by the kind of people he used to joke about at his country club dinners. But the real torture for Travis wasn't the environment, it was the math. He was sitting on a metal bench running the numbers in his head, realizing that without the land, without the deed, and without me dead, he had a $2 million hole in his life and a shark waiting to fill it. At 8:00 a.m., Blackwood arrived. He parked his luxury sedan next to my truck, looking out of place and entirely comfortable at the same time. He carried a briefcase and a fresh cup of coffee. "He's in a contact room," Blackwood said, leaning against my truck door. He waved his right to a public defender. "He's been screaming for you. He says it's a misunderstanding. He says you'll fix it." I poured the rest of my coffee onto the asphalt. "Let's go," I said. We walked through the security checkpoints. The guards knew me. They nodded their eyes, showing a mixture of respect and pity. They knew what Travis had done. In a small town, attempted patricide doesn't stay quiet. It screams. When they brought Travis into the room, he looked like he had aged 10 years in 10 hours. His eyes were bloodshot, rimmed with dark circles. His hands, usually manicured and soft, were shaking violently as he gripped the edge of the metal table. He wasn't handcuffed, but he looked restrained by his own terror. "Dad," he choked out the moment the door closed. "Thank God. You came. You have to get me out. You have to tell them it was a mistake. The gas." I was trying to fix it. "I smelled a leak. Stop," I said. I sat down opposite him. Blackwood stood by the door, a silent sentinel. "Stop lying, Travis. We aren't in front of a jury. We are in a room with the truth." Travis fell silent. He looked at Blackwood, then back at me. He licked his dry lips. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay. No lies." "But Dad, you don't understand. It's not just the police. It's Vinny." I leaned back in the metal chair. "Vinny the shark." Travis flinched at the name. "He knows I'm here, Dad. He has guys inside. I got a message this morning. A note on my breakfast tray. It just said, tick-tock." I didn't blink. I knew Vinny Moretti. He was efficient. He wants his money. Travis continued, his voice rising in panic. $2 million. If I don't pay him, he's going to have me killed in here. He thinks I sold him the land. He thinks I stiffed him. You have to help me. You have to sell the warehouse. Pay him off. Please. If you pay him, he'll back off. Then I can deal with the charges. But I can't fight a murder charge if I'm dead. I looked at my son. He was begging for his life. He was asking me to sell the very thing he had tried to kill me for just to save him from the consequences of his own greed. I reached into my jacket pocket. I didn't pull out a checkbook. I pulled out a thick, folded document bound in blue legal paper. I slid it across the table. Travis looked at it. "What is this?" "Read it," I said. He opened the folder. His eyes scanned the legal jargon. It was a transfer of lien, an assignment of debt. I saw the moment the realization hit him. His brow furrowed, then smoothed, then went slack with shock. "Nemesis Holdings," he read aloud. "Who is Nemesis Holdings?" "I am," I said. Travis looked up, confusion warring with fear. I bought the debt, Travis. Last night. While you were being booked, Blackwood and I had a meeting with Mr. Moretti. We bought your note for 50 cents on the dollar. Vinny was happy to get his cash and walk away. He doesn't care about you anymore. You aren't his problem." Travis let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for years. He slumped back in his chair, a manic grin spreading across his face. "You bought it. You paid him off. Oh, thank God. Thank God. Dad, I knew you wouldn't let me die. I knew it." He laughed, a wet, hysterical sound. "So I owe you now," he said, wiping his eyes. That's fine. We can work that out. I'll pay you back. Once I get out, once I get back on my feet, we can set up a payment plan. No interest, right? Family rate." I stared at him. He truly didn't get it. He thought this was a rescue mission. He thought I was the safety net he had been falling into his entire life. "There is no payment plan, Travis," I said softly. He stopped laughing. "What I didn't buy the debt to forgive it," I said. "I bought it to call it in." The room went cold, the air conditioning hummed, but the chill came from the man sitting across from me. "I am calling the loan due, Travis, immediately. $2 million, plus penalties, plus interest." Travis stared at me. "But I don't have it." "You know I don't have it." "I know," I said. "Which means you are in default. Which means I am foreclosing. Not on a house you don't own, but on you." I stood up. I walked around the table. Travis turned in his chair to face me. He looked like a child who had just been told Santa Claus was dead. "Dad, what are you doing?" he whispered. I pulled my checkbook from my back pocket. I pulled a pen from my shirt. I laid the checkbook on the table. "You wanted money," I said. "You wanted a payout. You wanted the easy way out." I wrote a check. I filled in the date. I wrote his name. Travis O'Connor. I wrote the amount. $2 million and 00 over 100. I signed it. My hand was steady. My signature was bold. I tore the check from the book. The sound of the paper ripping was loud in the small room. I held it up. Travis stared at it. It was his salvation. It was his freedom. It was everything he had ever wanted. "Here it is," I said. "The money to pay the debt. The money to hire the best criminal defense team in the state. The money to maybe, just maybe, buy your way out of a 20-year sentence." Travis reached for it. His hand was trembling. "Dad, thank you. I promise I will." I pulled the check back. "You tried to gas me in my sleep," I said. "You tried to frame me for fentanyl. You called me a useless old man." I gripped the check with both hands. "I am not your father right now, Travis. I am your creditor, and your credit is no good." I ripped the check in half. Travis screamed. It wasn't a word. It was a sound of pure animal pain. No, he yelled, lunging for the pieces. I ripped them again, and again. I let the confetti of blue paper rain down onto the metal table. You are on your own, son, I said. Vinny might be gone, but the debt remains. And since you can't pay me, I am going to take everything else. I am going to hand over every piece of evidence I have to the district attorney. The video, the audio, the forensic report on the gas line. I am going to make sure you never see the outside of a cell again. Travis fell out of his chair. He dropped to his knees on the cold linoleum floor. He grabbed my hand, his fingers digging into my skin. He was weeping openly now, snot running down his face, his dignity completely gone. Dad, please don't do this. I am your flesh and blood. I am scared. I don't want to die in here. Please, just give me a chance. I'll do anything. I'll sign anything. I looked down at him. I looked at the son I had carried on my shoulders. I looked at the man who had sold me for a strip mall. I pulled my hand away. It wasn't violent. It was just final. You had a chance, Travis, I said. You had 40 years of chances. You had a home. You had an education. You had a job. You threw it all away because you didn't want to work for it. You wanted to steal it. I stepped back. Blackwood opened the door. Enjoy the view from the bottom, I said, because you dug this hole yourself. I walked out of the room. I heard him screaming my name. I heard him banging on the table. I heard the guards moving in to restrain him. I walked down the hallway, my boots echoing on the floor. I didn't look back. I didn't feel the need to. The cord was cut. The weight was gone. But as we stepped out into the morning light, my phone buzzed. It was a text from the private investigator. We found her, it read. Storage Unit 404. She's moving the rest of the stash. I looked at Blackwood. He was putting his sunglasses on. One down, I said. Blackwood nodded. Shall we go collect the other one? I climbed into my truck. The engine roared to life. I wasn't just a creditor anymore. I was the repo man, and Brittany was overdue. The metal roll-up door of Storage Unit 404 rattled violently as Sheriff Reynolds pounded on it with his fist. Inside, I could hear the frantic shuffling of boxes and the distinctive zip of a duffel bag being closed in panic. Brittany wasn't just moving furniture. She was trying to erase the evidence of a felony. We didn't wait for an invitation. Reynolds used the bolt cutters on the cheap padlock. It snapped with a metallic crack that echoed in the empty corridor of the storage facility. He threw the door upward. Brittany was standing in the center of the small concrete room, illuminated by the harsh fluorescent hallway light. She looked like a deer caught in the headlights of a semi-truck, except she wasn't holding corn. She was clutching a black bag to her chest. Behind her, stacked on a folding table, were boxes of clear plastic baggies and a digital scale. It was a distribution center. It was the hub of the operation she had claimed to know nothing about. She didn't run this time. There was nowhere to go. She dropped the bag. It hit the floor with a heavy thud. She raised her hands, her face twisting from shock into something ugly and calculating. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She looked at Reynolds, then at me, and her eyes narrowed. I want a deal, she said. Her voice was steady, cutting through the dusty air. I want immunity. I have information. Reynolds stepped inside, his hand on his weapon, though the only threat she posed was toxic. You have the right to remain silent, Brittany. I suggest you use it. I know my rights, she snapped. And I know what you want. You want the supplier. You want the network. Travis doesn't know anything. He is just the mule. He is the idiot who drives the car. I am the one who knows where the bodies are buried. I watched her from the doorway. She was throwing her husband to the wolves before the handcuffs were even on her wrists. It was exactly what I expected. Greed doesn't have loyalty. It only has appetite. Reynolds cuffed her. He read her rights again. She ignored him, staring directly at me. "You think you won, Jack?" she hissed as they walked her past me. "You think because you have money, you are untouchable. I know things about your son that will put him away for life. If I go down, I am taking him with me." I looked at her, at the woman who had shared my son's bed and plotted my death. "That is the plan, Brittany," I said. We drove back to the station. The mood was different this time. The first arrest had been a shock. This one was a surgical strike. We weren't just catching criminals, we were dissecting a marriage. They put Brittany in interrogation room B. Travis was still in room A, sobbing into his hands. They were separated by a single cinder block wall and a two-way mirror, but the distance between them was now infinite. I stood in the observation room with Blackwood and the district attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Vance who had been briefed on the situation. We watched Brittany on the monitor. She was sitting straight-backed, her hands clasped on the table. She looked composed. She looked dangerous. "Bring in the stenographer," Vance said into the intercom. "She is ready to talk." Reynolds entered the room. He sat down opposite Brittany. "Okay," Brittany Reynolds said. "You wanted to talk?" "Talk." She took a deep breath. "It wasn't Travis," she said. "It was never Travis. He doesn't have the stomach for this. He is a gambler, sure. He is a loser. But he isn't a trafficker. He got into debt with Vinny. He was scared. So he bought the drugs," Reynolds asked. "No," she said quickly. "He was forced to hold them. He was just storage. But he told me about the plan to frame Jack. He came up with the idea to put the pills in the truck. He said if Jack went to prison, we would get power of attorney. He forced me to go along with it. He said if I didn't help him, Vinny would kill us both." I watched the screen. She was weaving a narrative that painted her as the victim of a coercive husband. She was smart. She knew that if she could pin the mastermind role on Travis, she might walk away with a lesser charge. She was sacrificing him to save herself. He cut the gas line, she continued, her voice gaining confidence. "I begged him not to. I told him it was crazy. I told him Jack was his father. But he was manic. He said he needed the money. He said he would burn the whole world down if he had to. I was terrified of him. I ran away tonight because I was scared he would come after me next. It was a good story. It had emotion. It had a villain. It had a damsel in distress. The only problem was that it was a lie." I looked at Blackwood. He nodded. He opened his briefcase and handed a thick file to District Attorney Vance. "Ms. Vance," Blackwood said, "before you consider any deals, you should see this." Vance opened the file. She scanned the first few pages. Her eyebrows shot up. "This is verified?" she asked. "Digital forensics from a white hat firm we employ." Blackwood said. "IP tracking. MAC addresses. Keystroke logs. It is all there." Vance closed the file. She smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "I think I need to have a conversation with Mrs. O'Connor," Vance said. She walked out of the observation room and into the interrogation room. She threw the file onto the table. It landed with a slap that made Brittany jump. "That is quite a story," Brittany Vance said, leaning over the table. "The terrified wife. The coercive husband." It almost made me cry. "It is the truth," Brittany insisted. "Is it?" Vance asked. She opened the file. "Because according to this, the fentanyl wasn't given to Travis by Vinny. It was purchased on the dark web 3 months ago, using a Tor browser installed on a laptop registered to you, paid for with Bitcoin transferred from a wallet linked to your personal bank account." Brittany froze. Her composure cracked. And the search history, Vance continued, flipping a page. "It is fascinating. How to synthesize scopolamine. Lethal dosage of carbon monoxide. Inheritance laws for incarcerated heirs. These searches weren't made from Travis's phone, Brittany. They were made from your iPad. The one we just seized from your bag. Brittany's mouth opened and closed. She looked at the file. She looked at the mirror. She knew I was behind it. She knew I had been watching. Travis didn't plan this. Did he? Vance pressed. Travis is too busy losing money at the track to figure out how to navigate the Silk Road. You bought the drugs. You planned the frame job. You researched the gas leak. You aren't the victim, Brittany. You are the architect. Brittany slammed her hand on the table. He knew she screamed, her facade shattering completely. He knew everything. He drove the car, he taped the envelope, he cut the pipe. I may have bought the stuff, but he is the one who tried to kill his father. He is just as guilty as I am. Reynolds stood up. So you admit you bought the fentanyl? Yes, she shrieked. Yes, I bought it. Because he is useless. He couldn't make money. He couldn't pay his debts. He couldn't do anything right. I had to fix it. I had to save us, and he went along with it. He wanted the old man dead, just as much as I did. Vance looked at the mirror. Bring him in, she said. 2 deputies dragged Travis into the room. They didn't put him in a chair. They just held him by the door. He looked at Brittany. He saw the file. He saw the look on her face. She says you forced her, Travis Reynolds said calmly. She says you are the mastermind. She says she was just a scared wife doing what she was told. Travis's eyes bulged. He looked at Brittany, the woman he had married, the woman he had tried to kill for. You said what? Travis stammered. Brittany stood up, pointing a shaking finger at him. Tell them, Travis, tell them you cut the pipe. Tell them you wanted him dead, Travis lunged. The deputies held him back, but he strained against their grip, his face purple with rage. You witch, he screamed. It was your idea. You told me he was too old. You told me the gas would look like an accident. You bought the pills. You told me where to put them. I didn't even know what fentanyl was until you showed me. I told you to stop gambling, Brittany yelled back. I told you we needed money. You ruined us. You are a loser, Travis, a pathetic, weak loser who couldn't even kill an old man, right? They tore into each other. It was primal. It was vicious. They spilled every secret, every crime, every dark thought they had shared in the privacy of their conspiracy. They confessed to mortgage fraud. They confessed to the fake insurance claims on the car. They confessed to stealing my identity to open credit cards. They were doing the prosecutor's job for him. Every scream was a deposition. Every accusation was an admission of guilt. I watched from behind the glass. I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel joy. I felt a profound, hollow sadness. These were 2 people who had everything. They had youth. They had health. They had each other. And they threw it all into a furnace because they didn't want to work for the heat. Enough, Vance shouted, slamming her hand on the table. The room went silent. Travis was panting, tears streaming down his face. Brittany was trembling, her chest heaving. We have it all, Vance said quietly. The purchase, the conspiracy, the attempt, the fraud. You both just confessed to a laundry list of federal and state crimes. She looked at Travis. You are going away for attempted murder and trafficking. She looked at Brittany. And you are going away for conspiracy, trafficking, and financing a criminal enterprise. Travis looked at the glass. He looked right at where I was standing. He couldn't see me, but he knew I was there. Dad, he whispered. Dad, please. She made me. I turned away from the window. I couldn't look at him anymore. The monster wasn't under the bed. It was in the room, and it had my last name. I walked out of the observation room. Blackwood followed me. That is a wrap, Blackwood said. The DA has enough to put them both away for 20 years minimum. I nodded. I walked down the hallway, the sound of their screaming still faintly audible through the heavy door. I needed air. I needed to get the smell of the station out of my nose. I walked out to the parking lot. The sun was fully up now. It was a beautiful day. The kind of day you go fishing. The kind of day you work in the garden. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from the bank. The check I had written to buy the debt had cleared. Vinny was paid. The sharks were gone. But as I reached for my truck door, I saw a black sedan pull into the lot. The window rolled down. It was Vinny Moretti. He didn't look like a shark today. He looked like a businessman who had just made a very good deal. He nodded at me. Just a single respectful nod. Then he drove away. He knew. He knew I had handled my own business. He knew I didn't need him to break legs. I had broken their lives instead. I climbed into my truck. I had one more stop to make. One more loose end to tie up before I could truly be free. I had to go to the jail. I had to look my son in the eye one last time. Not to save him, but to tell him the truth about the land he had killed for. To tell him about the $85 million he would never touch. I started the engine. The old diesel rumbled steady and reliable. Unlike family, the truck never let me down. The visiting room at the county detention center smelled of industrial lemon cleaner and despair. It was a smell I knew well from my years in the logistics business, dealing with drivers who ended up on the wrong side of the law, but it had never burned my nose quite like this. I sat on a metal stool bolted to the floor, my hands resting on the cold, stainless steel shelf that ran the length of the room. A thick pane of plexiglass separated the free world from the caged one. I waited for 10 minutes before the heavy steel door on the other side buzzed and clanked open. A guard led Travis in. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit that was 2 sizes too big. His wrists were shackled to a waist chain. He shuffled. The swagger was gone. The arrogance that had fueled his stride for 38 years had evaporated, replaced by a hunch in his shoulders that made him look like an old man. He sat down. He didn't pick up the phone handset immediately. He just looked at me. His eyes were hollow, rimmed with red, swimming in a mixture of fear and confusion. He looked like a child who had been punished for something he didn't understand, even though he understood it perfectly. He reached out with a shaking hand and lifted the black receiver. I picked up mine. "Dad," he whispered. The sound was tinny through the speaker. "Hello, Travis. Why are you here?" he asked. His voice cracked. "Did you come to gloat? Did you come to watch?" "I came to finish it," I said. "I came to close the book." He laughed, a dry, bitter sound. "It's closed, Dad. I'm in here. Brittany is in the women's wing. Vinny is paid off, but I'm destitute. You took the trust. You took the inheritance. You won." "What else is there?" I reached into the inner pocket of my jacket. I pulled out a folded document. It wasn't a legal brief. It wasn't a lawsuit. It was a contract. A government contract. I pressed it against the glass so he could see the seal of the Department of Defense and the Department of Energy. "You never asked me about the warehouse, Travis," I said quietly. "You and Brittany, you looked at that rusted metal shed and you saw eyesore. You saw scrap. You saw a place to park a few trucks. You thought the land was worth $15 million because of the highway access." Travis squinted at the paper. "What is this? You tried to sell it for $850,000. I continued, ignoring his question. "You were so desperate for cash, so desperate to pay off a shark, that you were willing to sell a diamond for the price of glass. It was just dirt, Dad." He snapped, a flash of his old anger returning. "It was scrubland. $15 million was a pipe dream. No one pays that for dirt in this county." I shook my head slowly. "You didn't do your homework, son. You never did. You looked at the surface. You never looked underneath." I tapped the glass right over the seal on the document. "6 months ago, before you started spiraling, before you You forged the deed, the county rezoned my property. But it wasn't just rezoning. It was a strategic acquisition. Do you know what runs under that warehouse, Travis? He stared at me silent. The main fiber-optic trunk line for the entire eastern seaboard, I said. And the high-voltage transmission corridor from the nuclear plant upstate. It is the only 10-acre parcel in the state with direct redundant access to Tier 1 data and gigawatt power. Travis's eyes flickered. He was listening now. He was doing the math. 3 months ago, I signed a preliminary agreement, I said. Not with a strip mall developer. Not with a housing contractor. I signed with a consortium building a national data center. A secure facility for cloud computing and government archives. Travis swallowed hard. His Adam's apple bobbed. So, it's worth more than 15, he whispered. I leaned in closer to the glass. The contract price, Travis, for the land, the rights of way, and the existing infrastructure footprint is $85 million. The silence that stretched between us was heavier than the steel doors. I watched the number hit him. 85 million. It wasn't just wealth. It was dynastic power. It was private jets and islands. It was the kind of money that solves every problem a man like Travis ever had 1,000 times over. 85. He mouthed the words, unable to give them voice. And it was done, I said. The ink was drying. The closing date was set for next month. All I had to do was hand over the title. Travis dropped the phone. It swung on its cord, clattering against the metal wall. He grabbed his head with both hands, his fingers digging into his scalp. He was hyperventilating. He picked the phone up again, his movements jerky and frantic. Dad. Dad. You have that money. You have $85 million. I will, I said. Next Friday. Travis's face transformed. The despair vanished, replaced by a manic, desperate hope. It was disgusting to watch. It was the look of an addict who just found a vein. Dad, listen to me. 85 million. That changes everything. You can get the best lawyers. You can bribe the judges if you have to. You can get me out of here. We can fix this. Even if I'm out of the trust, you can just give it to me. You can gift it. We can leave the country. Dad, please. 85 million, that's everything. I looked at him. I looked at the greed that was so deeply ingrained in his DNA that even a prison cell couldn't scrub it out. He wasn't thinking about the crime. He wasn't thinking about the gas leak. He was thinking about the payout. I pulled the document back from the glass. I folded it deliberately, creasing the paper with my thumb. You still don't understand, do you? I asked softly. You think this is a negotiation? You think I came here to tell you that we won the lottery? I reached into my pocket again. I pulled out a second document. This one was shorter. It was a deed of gift, a charitable donation form. I didn't sell the land for profit, Travis, I said. He froze. What? I signed the final papers this morning, I said. Before I came here. The $85 million isn't going into my bank account. It isn't going into a trust fund for a son who tried to murder me. I held the second paper up. 100% of the proceeds are being diverted directly to the Veterans Assistance Foundation and the Children's Hospital Research Wing. I am keeping enough to buy a used RV and pay for my gas. The rest is going to people who actually appreciate the value of a life. Travis stared at the paper. His eyes were bulging. His face turned a shade of purple I had never seen before. You gave it away, he screamed. The sound distorted through the cheap speaker. You gave away $85 million. Are you insane? That is my money. That is my birthright. It was never your money, I said, my voice hard as iron. It was my work. It was my sweat. And it was my choice. You tried to kill me for a few $100,000. You sold your soul for pennies, Travis. If you had just waited, If you had just been a decent human being, if you had just loved me. My voice caught. I had to stop. I had to swallow the lump in my throat. If you had just been my son, it would have been yours. All of it. You wouldn't have had to steal it. You wouldn't have had to kill for it. I was building it for you. Travis slammed his fist against the glass. The thud vibrated through the partition. You old bastard, he shrieked. You did this to spite me. You would rather burn the money than give it to me. I hate you. I wish the gas had worked. I wish you were dead. I watched him rage. I watched him spit and scream and curse the man who had given him life. I felt the final tether snap, the last thread of obligation, of hope, of fatherhood. It broke. I stood up. I didn't feel angry anymore. I didn't feel sad. I felt light. I didn't do it to spite you, Travis, I said into the receiver. I did it because I don't want your inheritance to be money. I want your inheritance to be this moment. I hung up the phone. Travis was still screaming, but I couldn't hear him anymore. He was mouthing curses, hammering on the glass, his face twisted into a mask of pure hatred. The guards were moving in behind him. They grabbed his shoulders. He fought them. He was thrashing, yelling about millions, about theft, about justice. I turned my back on him. I walked toward the heavy steel door. I heard the buzzer. I pushed the door open and stepped out into the hallway. The air in the corridor was still stale, still smelled of cleaner, but to me it smelled like freedom. I walked out of the detention center and into the bright, blinding sunlight of the parking lot. My truck was waiting for me. My old, reliable Ford. It wasn't worth $85 million. It was worth about $3,000 on a good day. But it was mine, and it was paid for. I climbed into the cab. I sat there for a moment listening to the silence. No more schemes. No more whispers in the kitchen. No more looking over my shoulder. I pulled the burner phone from my pocket, the one I had used to coordinate the forensic team, the one I had used to trap Brittany. I rolled down the window. I tossed it into the trash can next to the entrance. I started the engine. The diesel rumbled to life, a deep, comforting growl. I put the truck in gear and pulled out onto the road. I didn't look back at the jail. I didn't look back at the town that held so many ghosts. I turned onto the highway heading west. Blackwood had texted me earlier. The RV was ready for pickup in the next state over. A 40-foot diesel pusher. King bed. Satellite internet. Everything a man needed to see the country he had spent a lifetime working in, but never watching. I checked my rearview mirror one last time. The road behind me was empty. The road ahead was long. Travis O'Connor was going to spend the next 20 years thinking about a warehouse. He was going to spend every night in a concrete cell counting to 85 million. And me, I was going fishing. The trial wasn't the media circus Brittany had probably fantasized about in her days of delusions of grandeur. There were no cameras flashing in the hallway, no reporters shouting questions about the tragic fall of a prominent family. It was a Tuesday morning in County Superior Court Department 4, and the room smelled of floor wax and indifference. I sat in the back row, the wooden bench hard against my spine, my hat resting on my knee. Next to me sat Blackwood, checking his watch, treating the destruction of my lineage like a 9:00 a.m. dental appointment. Travis and Brittany were brought in separately. They didn't look at each other. The hatred radiating between them was tangible, a cold front moving through the stale air of the courtroom. Travis had lost 20 pounds. His suit, the one he had worn to so many failed business meetings, hung off his frame like a shroud. He looked small. He looked like a man who had been hollowed out by the realization that he wasn't the protagonist of his own life, but merely the villain in mine. Brittany looked harder, sharper, her eyes darting around the room, looking for an exit that didn't exist. She saw me. She didn't glare. She just looked tired, the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that comes from running a race you lost 3 miles back. The proceedings were brutal in their efficiency. There was no drama, no surprise witness bursting through the doors. The district attorney, Ms. Vance, didn't need theatrics. She had the holy trinity of prosecution, motive, means, and opportunity, all recorded in high-definition video and digital keystrokes. She played the tapes. The courtroom was silent, as my son's voice filled the air, tinny and distorted, but undeniable. "Just die, old man. Just die and fix this." I watched the jury. They didn't look angry. They looked disgusted. They looked at Travis not as a criminal mastermind, but as something pathetic and broken. A man who would gas his own father for a payout he hadn't even earned. Then came the financial forensics. Blackwood's team had done their job well. The flowcharts were projected onto the screen, red lines connecting Brittany's laptop to the dark web marketplace, blue lines connecting Travis's gambling debts to Vinny the Shark, and one thick black line connecting their joint desperation to the gas valve on the side of my house. It took the jury 4 hours to deliberate. 4 hours to decide that my son's life was worth less than the time it took to eat lunch. When the bailiff announced they had a verdict, Travis started to shake. I could see the tremors from the back of the room. His leg was bouncing uncontrollably under the defense table. He turned to look at me. He didn't mouth words this time. He didn't beg. He just looked at me with the eyes of a drowning man who realizes the lifeguard isn't swimming out. The foreman stood up. He was a mechanic from the next town over. I had fixed his transmission once. He didn't look at Travis. On the charge of attempted murder in the first degree, we find the defendant, Travis O'Connor, guilty. On the charge of aggravated trafficking of a controlled substance, we find the defendant, Travis O'Connor, guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, we find the defendant, Brittany O'Connor, guilty. The list went on. Fraud, arson, identity theft. Each guilty was a hammer blow driving the nails into the coffin of their future. Brittany put her head on the table and sobbed quietly. Travis stared at the ceiling, his mouth open, gasping for air, as if the room had suddenly run out of oxygen. The judge, a stern woman named Sullivan, who had zero patience for family betrayals, didn't waste time with a pre-sentencing investigation. The evidence was overwhelming, the intent malicious. She looked over her glasses at my son. "Mr. O'Connor," she said, her voice echoing in the hush, "you stand convicted of crimes that are repugnant to the very fabric of society. To attempt to take the life of the man who gave you life solely for financial gain speaks to a hollowness of character that I rarely see. You didn't just want his money. You wanted his erasure." Travis tried to stand. His lawyer pulled him down. "Your Honor, please," he croaked. "I was desperate. I was coerced." The judge ignored him. "For the charge of attempted murder, I sentence you to 20 years in the state penitentiary. For the charge of trafficking, 10 years to be served concurrently. You will not be eligible for parole until you have served at least 85% of your sentence. 20 years. The number hung in the air. 20 years meant he would walk out a man of nearly 60. He would miss the prime of his life. He would miss the world changing. He would rot in a cage while the data center built on my land processed the information of a future he would never see. Brittany O'Connor. The judge continued, turning her gaze to the daughter-in-law who had bought the poison. You were the architect. You provided the means. You fueled the fire. 10 years. State penitentiary. No parole eligibility for 7 years. The gavel banged. It was the loudest sound I had ever heard. Travis screamed. It wasn't a word. It was a noise of pure terror. He lunged toward the gallery, toward me, his chains rattling, his lawyers grabbing his arms. Dad. Dad, don't let them take me. 85 million. We can fix this, Dad. The bailiffs were on him in seconds. They slammed him against the table, securing his arms. He was thrashing, crying, snot running down his face. He looked at me, his eyes wide and wild. You did this. You planned this. You knew. You let me do it. I stood up. I buttoned my jacket. I looked him in the eye across the sea of wooden benches and the ruin of his life. "I didn't make you cut the pipe, Travis," I said, my voice carrying over his screams. "I didn't make you buy the drugs. I didn't make you hate me. I just turned on the lights." They dragged him out the side door. His screams faded into the corridor, a long, diminishing wail of regret. Brittany didn't scream. She walked out with her head down her wrists, cuffed behind her back, already calculating, already scheming how to survive the next decade. She was a survivor. She would do fine in prison. Travis was going to be eaten alive. I walked out of the courtroom. Blackwood was waiting by the doors. "It is done," he said. "The appeals will be filed, of course, but with the video evidence, they are procedural. He isn't getting out, Jack." I nodded. I felt a strange lightness in my chest. The anchor was cut. The ship was drifting, but it was free. "What about the debt?" I asked. Blackwood smiled, a shark recognizing blood in the water. "Since you own the debt, and the debtor is now incarcerated with no assets, we can write it off as a total loss for tax purposes. Or we can keep the judgment active. If he ever makes a dime in the commissary, if he ever writes a book, if he ever finds a penny on the sidewalk, it belongs to you." "Keep it active," I said. "I want him to know that even in a cage he is still in the red. I want him to remember the cost of business." We walked out into the sunlight. The city was bustling. People were going to work buying coffee, living lives that didn't involve poisoning their parents. It felt surreal to rejoin the stream of normalcy after drowning in the dark for so long. "I have one more stop," I told Blackwood. "The dealership?" he asked. "No, the VFW. I have a check to deliver." Blackwood nodded. He shook my hand. A firm, professional grip. "You are a hard man, Jack O'Connor," he said. I put my hat on. I adjusted the brim. "I am a father," I said, "and sometimes being a father means teaching the lessons that nobody else will." I watched him get into his car. I walked to my truck. It was waiting for me, dusty and loyal. I climbed in. I looked at the passenger seat. The ghost of the envelope was gone. The smell of the gas was gone. I started the engine. I didn't look back at the courthouse. Justice had been served cold and raw. My son was gone. My daughter-in-law was gone. The sharks were fed, the land was safe, and I was free. I put the truck in gear and drove toward the Veterans Hall. I had $85 million to give away, and I couldn't think of a better way to spend my afternoon. The purge was over. Now it was time to build something that wouldn't try to kill me in my sleep. The house was empty when I returned from the courthouse, but for the first time in 40 years, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt clean. I walked through the rooms one last time, my boots echoing on the hardwood floors. The furniture was gone, donated to a shelter in the city. The photos were packed in a single box, sitting on the passenger seat of my truck. The ghosts that had haunted these hallways. The ghost of the son I thought I had, the ghost of the family I tried to build, had been exorcised by the gavel of a judge. I didn't feel nostalgia as I looked at the kitchen where Travis had planned my murder. I didn't feel sadness as I looked at the office where Brittany had ransacked my life. I just felt finished. I locked the front door and left the keys under the mat for the representative from the Veterans Administration. They were taking possession in the morning. They were going to turn the house into a transition center for returning soldiers. It seemed fitting. This house had seen enough war. It was time it served those who actually fought for something honorable. I walked down the driveway to where my truck was idling. But I wasn't just driving the Ford today. Parked next to the barn, gleaming in the afternoon sun, was the future I had promised myself. It was a 45-foot Prevost motor coach, a beast of a machine painted in slate gray. It had a 600-horsepower engine, heated marble floors, and enough satellite technology to run a small country. I had bought it 2 days ago, paying cash while Travis was sitting in a cell trying to figure out how to pay for a candy bar. I didn't sell the Ford. I couldn't. That truck had saved my life. It was the only thing in this town that hadn't lied to me. I drove it around to the back of the RV and secured it to the heavy-duty tow hitch. It looked small behind the massive coach, like a loyal dog following its master. But I knew that when I got where I was going, when I parked the beast in some quiet canyon in Montana or on a beach in the Keys, I would need the truck to find the fishing spots the tourists didn't know about. I climbed into the driver's seat of the RV. The chair was air-ride leather, more comfortable than any furniture I had ever owned. The dashboard looked like the cockpit of a jet. I turned the key. The engine didn't roar. It hummed a low, powerful vibration that resonated in my chest. I checked the mirrors. I checked the air pressure. I checked the route on the GPS, west, just west. I pulled out onto the county road. The suspension absorbed the bumps that used to rattle my teeth in the truck. I drove past the sheriff's station without slowing down. I drove past the turnoff for the county jail, where my son was currently being processed for transfer to the state penitentiary. I didn't look. I kept my eyes on the horizon. 10 miles out of town, my phone buzzed on the console. It wasn't the burner phone. That was already in a trash can. It was my personal cell, the one only Blackwood and a few fishing buddies had the number for. I picked it up. It was an automated notification from my bank app, followed by a text from Blackwood. Transaction, complete deposit of $42,350. I read the text. Liquidated personal assets of T. O'Connor seized under the lien judgment. Designer watches, electronics, and remaining equity in personal vehicle. Vinny's books are closed. The balance is yours. I laughed. It was a dry, short sound. $42,000. That was all Travis had to his name. That was the sum total of his life's accumulation of flashy toys and status symbols. And because I owned his debt, because I held the judgment against him, it was mine. He had tried to steal $85 million, and instead I had taken the shirt off his back. I didn't need the money. I had more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. But I kept it. I transferred it immediately to a separate savings account. I labeled it bait money. I would use it to buy worms. I would use it to buy gas. I would use every single cent of my son's vanity to fund the peace he tried to steal from me. It was petty, perhaps. But after surviving a gas leak and a frame job, I felt I had earned the right to be a little petty. I drove for another hour until the cell towers of the city faded and the signal bars dropped. The landscape changed from suburbs to farmland, from farmland to open plains. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant streaks of orange and violet. I saw a rest stop up ahead. I pulled the massive rig over the air brakes, hissing as I came to a stop. I wasn't tired. I just needed to do one last thing. I opened the window. The air smelled of diesel and dry grass. I took the phone out of the cradle. I looked at it. It was a smart device capable of connecting me to the world, to the news, to the prison system, where my son would be rotting. It was a tether. I scrolled through my contacts. Travis? Brittany? Home. I deleted them, one by one. Then I powered the phone down. I held it in my hand, feeling the weight of it. It contained the recordings. It contained the texts. It contained the evidence of the worst weeks of my life. I stepped out of the RV. I walked to the edge of the rest stop, where a steep embankment led down to a dense thicket of brush and a small creek. I threw the phone. I threw it as hard as I could. It tumbled through the air, end over end, catching the last light of the sun before disappearing into the green overgrowth below. I didn't hear it land. I stood there for a moment, listening to the wind. I was 68 years old. I had no wife. I had no son. I had no home address. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the cool evening air. I had never been richer. I walked back to the RV. I climbed the steps and locked the door behind me. I went to the back to the master bedroom and opened the small safe I had installed there. I took out a map, a paper map worn at the creases. I spread it out on the bed. I traced a line with my finger. Wyoming, the Snake River. I heard the trout were biting this time of year. I went back to the driver's seat. I released the parking brake. I put the transmission in drive. The highway stretched out in front of me, a gray ribbon leading into the night. I turned on the radio. Classic rock, the kind Travis hated. I turned it up. I pressed the accelerator. The engine surged. The house was gone. The betrayal was in the rear view. The road was mine. My name is Jackson O'Connor. I am a father who survived his son. I am a man who bought his own freedom. And for the first time in a long time, I am exactly where I want to be. Moving forward. For decades, I believed that family was the ultimate investment. I was wrong. I learned that shared DNA is not a license for abuse, and being a father doesn't mean setting yourself on fire to keep your children warm. My son saw my kindness as weakness and my silence as ignorance. By walking away, I didn't lose a child. I lost a predator. True wealth isn't the $85 million I gave away. It is the peace of waking up without a target on my back. Sometimes the only way to heal is to cut the rot out, even if it shares your last name. If you believe justice was served, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments. Would you have donated the money, or would you have kept it all?